It definitely hit me really hard going on the boat. It felt almost eerie. I did not find anything suspicious. I just grabbed a couple things that would mean a lot to me, so I just grabbed a little bit and left. Like, I got her necklace here, is one of the things.
I want you to close your eyes for a second and think about the most careful you have ever been with your words. Think about a job interview. Think about a first date. Think about a police station. Think about every moment in your life where you knew, with absolute certainty, that every single syllable coming out of your mouth was being weighed, measured, and judged. In those moments, human beings are extraordinarily precise. We choose. We edit. We calculate. We say what we mean to say. Now think about the opposite. Think about calling your best friend at midnight because something terrible has happened. Think about a conversation on a couch, a voice shaking, tears you're not even trying to hold back, talking to someone who loves you, someone you trust completely, someone who would never, in a million years, use your words against you. In those moments, human beings say exactly what is in their minds. No filter, no performance. Just the raw, unguarded truth of how their brain has organized the event. On April 7th, 2026, Brian Hooker made a phone call. His wife of 25 years had been missing for 3 days. Search and rescue operations were still active in the waters around Elbow Key in the Abaco Islands of the Bahamas. Lynette Hooker had not been found. Brian was still free. He was still in the Bahamas. He was still publicly telling the world that his sole focus, his only purpose, his entire existence in those days was finding his wife. He believed he was calling 2 friends. Sailors he had met in late 2023 while anchored near them in Bradenton, Florida. People he and Lynette had broken bread with, shared sunsets with, laughed with on the water. Blaine and Mon Stevenson. People who knew him. People he trusted. The call lasted nearly 40 minutes. Brian Hooker spoke freely. He did not know that Blaine Stevenson was recording every single word. And in those 40 minutes, speaking to friends he trusted, describing the worst night of his life to people he believed would never judge him, Brian Hooker chose a specific word to describe the moment his wife of 25 years entered the water on the evening of April 4, 2026. He did not say she fell. He did not say she slipped. He did not say she went overboard. He did not say she lost her balance. He said she basically just bounced off the dinghy. One word. Bounced. And that word is now part of the permanent, documented, verified public record of this investigation. CBS News has the recording. Multiple major news organizations have independently confirmed its existence and its content. The Royal Bahamas Police Force has an active investigation. The United States Coast Guard criminal investigation remains open. And the question of what happened on that water on the evening of April 4, 2026, is the question that Lynette Hooker's mother, her daughter, and everyone who loved her needs answered. This is the full story. Every documented fact. Every verified inconsistency. Every word. Examined honestly. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old. She was born and raised in Onstead, Michigan, a small town where she grew up around lakes and water and the kind of outdoor life that becomes part of who you are. Her mother, Dolene Hamlet, told the Associated Press that Lynette had been around lakes, boats, sailing, and swimming her entire life. This was not someone who was uncomfortable on the water. This was not someone who needed to be watched, guided, or protected from the sea. The water was her element. Her daughter, Carly Ellsworth, told CBS News that Lynette was very fit and strong, a good swimmer. Someone who, in Carly's words, could not simply have fallen off a boat by accident. That detail matters. Because the official framing of what happened on April 4, 2026, is an accident. A tragic, sudden, nighttime accident on a small dinghy in windy conditions. And for that framing to hold, you need to accept that a fit, strong, lifelong swimmer who had spent more than a decade living and sailing on the open ocean simply fell off a boat. Lynette and Brian Hooker had been sailing together for more than 10 years. They documented their life at sea under the name The Sailing Hookers. Their social media presence was a carefully curated window into what looked, from the outside, like an extraordinary life. Sea turtles spotted off the stern. Sunrises over open water. Lynette's famous cinnamon rolls baked in a solar oven aboard their 55-foot sailboat named Soulmate. They had given everything to that life. Lynette had walked away from a career, from a house, from every material possession, to live at sea with Brian. Her last Instagram post went up on April 4, 2026. The same day she disappeared. The caption read, "Not going anywhere for a while." She had no idea what was coming. Now let's build the timeline exactly as it is documented, because the timeline is where this story begins to fracture. On the evening of April 4th, 2026, Brian and Lynette Hooker had anchored the Soulmate at Aunt Pat's Bay on Elbow Key. They took their 8-foot hard-bottom dinghy to Tahiti Beach, a popular spot with a floating bar that operates at low tide. From Tahiti Beach, they traveled to the Abaco Inn, a waterfront bar and restaurant in the area. Ken, the 38-year-old bartender who served Brian that evening, confirmed directly to Fox News Digital and the New York Post that he never actually saw Lynette during the approximately 2.5 hours the couple was at the bar. She had gone to the pool when Brian ordered the first round of drinks. Brian came back alone 90 minutes later for the second round. That detail is worth sitting with. 2.5 hours at the same location, and the bartender who served Brian twice cannot confirm Lynette was present for either drink. Now, look at the surveillance footage from the Abaco Inn. That footage was reviewed by Carly Ellsworth and her boyfriend Steve, and it was reported on by journalist Ashley Banfield on her show Drop Dead Serious. The footage shows Brian and Lynette leaving the Abaco Inn at approximately 6:38 in the evening. That is the surveillance record. That is what the cameras captured. When Brian gave his account to police about what happened that night, he told them they left the bar at approximately 7:30 in the evening. The surveillance footage places their departure at 6:38 p.m. Brian told police they left at 7:30 p.m. That is a 52-minute discrepancy. Not a small rounding error. Not a slightly different memory of whether it was 6:50 or 7:05. 52 minutes. And that 52-minute gap is not an isolated problem. It is the first crack in a timeline that has multiple fractures. The dinghy crossing from the Abaco Inn dock back to the Soulmate takes approximately 15 minutes. That is the documented estimate for that crossing. If they left the dock at 6:38 p.m. as the surveillance footage shows, they would have been on the water, in the dinghy, at approximately 6:38 to 6:53 p.m. Brian told the Stevensons in the recorded call that the sun set basically 10 minutes after Lynette went overboard. If they left at 6:38 and the crossing takes 15 minutes, the incident would have occurred at approximately 6:53 p.m. Sunset in those waters on April 4th, 2026 was at approximately 7:26 p.m. That means, according to the documented departure time and the documented sunset time, there was still more than 30 minutes of daylight remaining when the incident allegedly occurred. Jim Todd, a volunteer with the Hopetown Fire and Rescue Service who was at a restaurant that evening and who helped bring Brian to shore the following morning, confirmed directly to Ashley Banfield that at 6:38 p.m. there was still complete, full, unambiguous daylight in those waters and that it would remain that way for another 45 minutes to an hour. Brian's account of the darkness, the sun going down, the moon not having risen yet, the inability to see Lynette in the water near him, depends entirely on an incident time that is not supported by the surveillance record. Without the darkness, the explanation for why a former United States Marine could not locate his wife in the water near him requires entirely different answers. Now let's go to what Brian actually said on that recorded call. Because the recording is not just the word bounced. It is 40 minutes of detailed, unguarded narrative. It is Brian Hooker explaining, step by step, to people he trusted, exactly what happened that night. And when you lay that narrative next to the other documented accounts he gave, in text messages to his friend Daniel Danforth, in his statement to police, in his Facebook posts, and in his later public interviews, specific differences emerge that investigators have been examining closely. In the call to the Stevensons, Brian described the conditions on the water at the time of the incident as a little blow. His exact words, as reported by multiple major news organizations who verified the recording, were, "A little blow, like 20-some knot winds that popped up. A little blow. 20-some knot winds." In his Facebook post to the public, Brian wrote about unpredictable seas and high winds, language that paints a dramatically different picture of conditions on that water. Unpredictable seas suggests chaos, danger, the kind of conditions that even experienced sailors struggle with. A little blow is how a Marine who has lived on the ocean for a decade describes mild chop. Those two descriptions of the same weather, on the same night, in the same location, cannot both accurately represent the same conditions. One of them is shaped by audience. One of them is not. The one that was not shaped by audience, the one Brian gave without knowing anyone was recording him, was a little blow. In the call to the Stevensons, Brian said that Lynette tried to swim back to the yacht, which he estimated was about 1,000 yards from where the incident occurred. 1,000 yards. That is just over half a mile. In text messages to his friend Daniel Danforth, messages that CBS News obtained and reviewed, Brian said that the wind blew him away from her and that she swam towards the sailboat. Swimming toward the sailboat. That is a specific direction. That is one of two possible directions a person in the water between a dinghy and a shore could swim. Now look at what the Royal Bahamas Police Force said Brian told them. According to the account shared by police investigators, Brian told them he last saw his wife swimming toward the shore. Not toward the sailboat. Toward the shore. Toward the shore is the other direction. These are not two slightly different framings of the same event. These are two physically incompatible directions. A person cannot simultaneously be swimming toward a sailboat and toward the shore if the sailboat and the shore are in different directions. Brian told his friend Danforth she swam toward the sailboat. Brian told police she swam toward the shore. Danforth addressed this directly when he spoke to CBS News. He said that in comparing Brian's retelling of the disappearance with emerging media reports, the stories don't really match up. He specifically noted that Brian's messages reflected she was casually swimming back toward the sailboat, while police said Hooker recalled his wife being swept overboard and out to sea. Danforth also raised something else. He noted that the Hookers always had their phones with them and frequently posted videos online, and he specifically wondered why Brian's phone didn't work that night, or why they didn't have their phones in the dinghy at all on the evening Lynette went missing. Brian told the Stevensons he was yelling for her the whole time. He said he saw several boats come by and used his phone flashlight and flares to try to get their attention, but that none of the passing boats saw him. He said he threw the anchor and anchored the dinghy. He said that by the time he got the anchor set, he was a quarter to half a mile away from her. A quarter to half a mile is between 400 and 800 meters. Jim Todd estimated the incident location at approximately 150 yards from shore. Ken the bartender told Fox News Digital that the entire distance from the incident area to Marsh Harbor, where Brian eventually arrived, was only 4 miles. Brian told police he was unable to restart the dinghy's engine and paddled. He arrived at the boatyard at around 4 in the morning, approximately 7 to 8 hours after leaving the Abaco in dock. 7 to 8 hours. To cover 4 miles. In conditions that Captain Bill, who was anchored directly beside the Soulmate that night, described publicly on the Brian Anton Investigates podcast as, in his words, not that bad. Now, back to the word. Back to bounced. Because everything else, the timeline, the direction Lynette swam, the lighting, the weather, the 7-hour paddle, all of it matters. But the word matters in a way that is different. Here is why. When investigators examine a witness account, the specific language choices a person makes are not incidental. They are data. The vocabulary someone uses, particularly in an informal, unguarded setting, when they believe they are speaking privately, when they do not know they are being recorded, reflects how their mind is organizing the event they are describing. The word bounced is not grief language. Grief language, when a person is describing watching someone they love fall from a boat into dark water, sounds like she went over, she was gone, I lost her, she fell, I couldn't reach her. Those are the words of shock and horror and loss. Bounced is the word of a specific physical mechanism. Something bounces when it makes contact with a surface and rebounds from it. A ball bounces. An object strikes a surface with force and deflects. That is the physical definition of what bouncing is. When Brian Hooker said she basically just bounced off the dinghy, he was describing a physical interaction between his wife's body and the surface of the dinghy. Not a loss of balance. Not a misstep. Not a wave catching her wrong. A bounce. Off the dinghy. And he softened it, with basically and with just, in the way people soften things they are trying to minimize. Basically just bounced. The softening words did not change the physical description. They wrapped it in casualness. But the verb remained. Bounced. CBS News has that word on tape. NBC News reported on it. Fox News reported on it. News Nation reported on it. CNN reported on it. That word is documented across every major news organization that independently confirmed the recording's existence and content. It is not an interpretation. It is not a paraphrase. It is the word Brian Hooker chose, freely, unguarded, in conversation with people he trusted, not knowing a single syllable was being captured. He also said something else in that recording that has received significant attention from everyone who has analyzed his account. He said, "It was a cascade of failures, and I'm never going to forgive myself for it." Cascade of failures. That phrase has been reported by CNN, NBC News, CBS News, and Fox News as part of the verified recording content. A cascade of failures is not how a grieving husband describes watching his wife disappear. It is not the vocabulary of loss. It is the vocabulary of operational analysis. It is the vocabulary of someone who has been trained to conduct after-action reviews, to identify the sequence of individual errors that combine to produce a catastrophic outcome, and to understand precisely where the chain of events could have been broken. Brian Hooker served in the United States Marine Corps. He was trained in exactly that framework. And in his first unguarded, unmonitored, completely private description of the night his wife disappeared, he did not reach for grief. He reached for analysis. He described it as a cascade of failures. Not an accident. Not a tragedy. A cascade of failures, with a particular sequence, with identifiable steps, with a logic that could be traced. Now let's talk about the history. Because the night of April 4th, 2026, did not happen in a vacuum. In January 2026, 3 months before Lynette entered the water, she told her daughter Carly something specific. Carly confirmed this account to CNN and to Fox News Digital. Lynette described a confrontation with Brian in which he had threatened to throw her overboard. Those were the words Lynette used. Throw her overboard. 3 months before she was in the water. 3 months before Brian was standing in a dinghy describing how she basically just bounced off the boat. In 2015, more than a decade before April 4th, 2026, there is a police report in the public record. Lynette told an officer that Brian had choked her. The case was closed for insufficient evidence. That report is now part of the documented investigative record. In 2024, Mon Stevenson, whose husband would later record that April 7th phone call, received a series of text messages from Lynette. CBS News obtained those messages and confirmed them. In those messages, Lynette wrote, "I guess it was too much closeness. We decided to call it quits. I'm not going back." Mon asked if the two might be able to reconcile. Lynette responded, "It was real bad. I can't be out there with him." A month after sending those messages, Lynette went back. She was still at sea with Brian on April 4th, 2026. The daughter who walked into that marriage knowing its history flew to the Bahamas after her mother disappeared. Carly Ellsworth walked the shorelines where cadaver dogs were working. She sat on a dock and looked at the soulmate, her mother's home for a decade, and said out loud to no one, "Hey, Mom. I'm here, wherever you are." Brian Hooker has denied any wrongdoing completely and categorically. His attorney, Tel Butler, stated publicly that Brian Hooker categorically and unequivocally denies all wrongdoing and has been cooperating with relevant authorities. His Michigan-based attorney, Crystal Marie Hauer, told ABC News that Brian Hooker never would have harmed his wife of 25 years and asked the public to give him the benefit of the doubt. Following his release from custody, Brian gave his first public interview and said clearly that he never harmed Lynette and never would harm Lynette, and that he wants to find her. He has not been charged with any crime. The Royal Bahamas Police Force Commissioner confirmed to NBC News that Brian Hooker remains a named suspect who has not been cleared and can be rearrested at any time. The investigation continues. The devices seized from the soulmate under search warrant, devices that CBS News reviewed the warrant for, included a digital video recorder, digital tablets, and cell phone-related equipment, all described in that warrant as material evidence related to a missing person causing bodily harm. The Apple Watch data confirmed by the United States Coast Guard to Lynette's mother, Dolene, is part of the investigation. The U.S. Coast Guard criminal investigation remains open. The Royal Bahamas Police Force investigation remains active. And at the center of all of it is the recording. The 40 minutes that Brian Hooker gave freely to people he trusted, not knowing a word was being captured. The word bounced. The phrase cascade of failures. The timeline that places events in near darkness when documented evidence suggests full daylight. The direction Lynette was swimming, which changes depending on who Brian was talking to. 40 minutes of the most unfiltered version of Brian Hooker's account of that night. The version before attorneys shaped the language. The version before public statements were drafted. The version before anyone told him what words to use. It is the version he chose himself, for himself, in the privacy of a call he believed was between friends. Blaine Stevenson recorded it. He confirmed to CNN that he made the recording. He published it on YouTube after Brian was taken into custody because, as he told NBC News, Brian was unable to speak for himself while detained and Stevenson wanted to release Brian's own account of what happened, in Brian's own words. He gave the world Brian's own words. And those words are now permanent. They are in the public record. They have been verified. They have been reported. They cannot be walked back. They cannot be reframed. They exist exactly as Brian spoke them, to the people he trusted the most, in the hours after the worst night of his life. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old. She called the ocean her happy place. She spent a decade documenting sunsets and sea turtles and cinnamon rolls in a solar oven for a page called The Sailing Hookers. She was fit and strong. She had been swimming since she was a child. Her mother, Dolene Hamlet, is 76 years old. She is in Florida. She is waiting for a phone call that has not come. She told Ashley Banfield, "I just want nothing more than I love you and wish you would have come home." 3 months before she entered the water, Lynette Hooker told her daughter about a threat that used the words overboard. 3 months later, she was in the water. And the man who was with her when she went in, the man who was standing in that dinghy, the man who paddled through the night and arrived at a boatyard at 4 in the morning, described the moment she entered the water to the friends he trusted most. He did not reach for grief. He did not reach for shock. He reached for a word. A very specific word. A word that describes a physical mechanism. A word that implies contact, force, surface, and departure. He said she basically just bounced off the dinghy. The investigation has the recording. The investigation has the Apple Watch data. The investigation has the devices seized from the soulmate. The investigation has the surveillance footage. The investigation has every documented inconsistency between every account Brian Hooker has given to every person he has spoken to since the night of April 4th, 2026. The truth of what happened on that water is what Lynette Hooker deserves. Every word, examined honestly. Every account, compared carefully. Every inconsistency, followed to its conclusion. If you have any information about the disappearance of Lynette Hooker, contact the Royal Bahamas Police Force or the United States Coast Guard. Both investigations remain active. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. All individuals referenced in this video are presumed innocent unless formally charged and convicted in a court of law. This is Global Crime Files. Every victim deserves the truth. Every story deserves to be told completely. And we will keep telling this one until there are answers.